Hi, I'm back, and this time with some slightly different kind of content. Now, one problem that all of us have who are suffering with long COVID, ME/CFS, or other invisible energy limiting conditions is communicating to others, whether that be family, friends, or partners, the complexity, difficulty, and severity of the experience. And this is where my next couple of interviews come in. In this video, I talk to novelist and long hauler Kate Weinberg about her latest short novel, There's Nothing Wrong with Her. And coming up, I speak to Anna Davidson about her poetry anthology, both writers using the art form to communicate beautifully the challenges of the hellish roller coaster that we've all been on. I recommend both of these extraordinary pieces of work, not just to those who are suffering themselves, but anyone in their support network, and indeed absolutely anyone on the planet who's interested in the human condition. So without further ado, let's dive in. Everybody struggles with long COVID to try and put the experience into words. When you started trying to do that, how did you go about trying to describe the indescribable?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? So I pretty early on came up with this idea of this metaphor of the pit, which was this almost, it was like in my head, a kind of inverted volcano. And when you started feeling symptoms, you were at the top, and then you would sink down through this rather sort of narrowing, constricting, dark and despairing place through to the bottom. And up near the top was the pain and the symptoms, and that was obviously not fun and pretty miserable, but you could manage it. And then as you went through the layers, you realised all the mind games that you play with yourself around it, all the fear and doubt, both about your own health and whether you're ever going to get out of it, but also the stigma of the illness and what that does to your own sense of self-belief. And that really at the bottom of the pit was that fear of, is this completely real? Which all long haulers know it's real, but then there's just this horrible feeling if you're better for a moment, which is, hang on, has my mind been playing tricks on me? So I wanted to get all that richness and complexity into an image. And once I had this idea of the pit and going in and out of it, actually the story started to build from there, because it became something a little bit like a prison break. I needed to get out of the pit. You know, I had some drama inherent in this idea, which is, how do I escape from this?
It's interesting because I've previously used a similar type of metaphor to describe depression, which is about being on a party boat that's sort of sailing along and every music's playing, everyone's dancing around the deck, and you fall overboard, thrashing about at the surface of the water, and then you start to sink below. And as you start to sink underneath the surface of the water, the light starts to get darker, the shape of the party boat starts to get more and more indistinct, and then finally you get down to the bottom and all light around you is gone, and you can't remember what it was ever like to be on the surface.
And that's the thing, isn't it, is that once you get down there to the very bottom, amidst all your worst fears, as well as the grimness of the illness itself and the fear of never getting better, you just have no emotional memory of what it's like to feel completely well, or to be even in those periods of wellness, but with the illness stalking you and kind of gaslighting you and making you feel that any minute you could go back, you could slip back down into the pit. And as soon as you understand that, there's actually, rather than it just being, oh God, what a boring story to tell, someone stuck in bed, there's a huge amount of drama in it. You know, the stakes are very high and it's existential, this threat.
How did you go about trying to craft a narrative that actually took us, you know, sort of classical story structure and all of that? How did you manage to fit this experience of long COVID into that? And without being too prescriptive of a character who does A, B, and C and then miraculously gets better by the end, which would be the natural temptation if a studio was trying to turn this into a movie, right?
Yes.
So how did you find that narrative structure through this experience, which is so almost structureless?
Yeah, well, it is, except for the fact that there's genuine story in there for anyone who's been ill over a period of time. They'll know this, that what happens during the illness is that everything else in your life gets pulled in as well. It's not just about the sickness itself, it's about your relationships and how people react to them. It's about your job and whether you can carry on doing that. So as soon as you start bringing the rest of your life into the pit, there's a story there. So my character has a relationship that she begins to question, a trauma in her past that surfaces and has been, buried for a long time. So then you've got your classic story within that is your character's journey, and long COVID becomes something that heightens and sort of packs you into that drama. And this is, I think, how we should be talking about long COVID when we're trying to explain it to people, which is, I think people think of sickness as sort of time out from your life, and therefore it's something they're waiting around for you to get better. And actually it's not time out from your life. If you've got long COVID, you're in your life, and all the dramas and problems, all the dials are turned up to 11 because you can't cope with a lot of things, and a lot of people are showing you bits of their character that are really difficult to deal with when you're ill, or all of these things become part of your sickness. So I think people need to understand that when you have long COVID, it's just like you're in your life, but you've got an incredibly heavy set of armour on you, and you're clanking around in it, and everything is harder.
In the book, you just touched on it then, there is reference to sort of prior trauma, and there is some sort of oblique references to the mind-body connection. These are controversial subjects in the world of long COVID. Did you question it at all before building those elements into the story, or did you feel that they were important for your own experience and that's why you wanted to include them?
I think this has become this very polarising conversation, which doesn't need to be polarised at all, which is if you say there's any kind of cognitive or mental entanglement in the illness, you're somehow diminishing the experience of people with chronic illness. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that it's something that makes it even more difficult. And for me, it was part of the process of recovery, was to scrutinise that and try and understand that better. And I would say writing about it has helped. It has given me a sense of agency around what this illness that makes you feel so helpless and so completely cut off from your own sort of former version of yourself. And actually the nicest thing about this so far is already the early responses have been from people who said, God, that really makes me understand someone else's experience. I really had no idea. So I'm hoping that in its own small way, it's just going to create a bit more empathy around the subject.
From my perspective, personally, I think that the partners, carers, families of everybody who's suffering with long COVID should read this book.
Oh, thank you.
I think that you communicate the complexity of the condition, the physicality of it, the emotionality of it, the despair of it, in a way that I've not seen communicated anywhere else. And I've tried to do my own version of that through this channel, but I think fiction gives something beyond what, fiction gives us a different lens onto understanding something and communicating something that is as complex and as nebulous and as intangible and as capricious and as sly as long COVID is.
Sly is a great word. I mean, I think, there are these big subjects in the world that we need better storytelling around. Climate or most minorities, and being a chronic illness sufferer, you are a marginal cohort in society that people would often rather not look at, and we need to find different ways of just cutting through that prejudice, fear, apathy, all of the things that make people just, you can see it on people's expression when they ask how you are. It's, funnily enough, not that dissimilar to when they ask you how your novel's going, which is if you've got any experience of having been rewriting a novel for too long, they're like, how's that going? Are we going to hear a positive story? And actually, for being serious for a second, people just want to believe in narratives that progress. And the worst thing for people around chronic illness is that you're stuck and they can't bear stuckness. And in a way, stuckness is worse than death for some people. It's so incredibly challenging. And so I wanted to create a world where my character Vita is stuck, but everything within her interior world is incredibly dynamic, heightened, dramatic, terrifying, and try and tell that story in a way that really gripped people, rather than thinking there's someone in bed over there who's become boring to me, who has become slightly frightening to me, who smells a bit, who hasn't done anything that I can catch up on. So I'm going to find it hard to converse with them. And what I'm trying to convey here is, no, there's a hell of a lot going on. Actually, illness cracks you open and it turns up the dials on all the things in your life that perhaps you were too busy to really look at properly. You know, the more we spread the word about how complex this experience is, it's not just for us. That's not just for us, right? There are going to be 10 other people that person comes into contact with who may not have had long COVID, but have had some other life-altering rupture that maybe they can understand a bit better.
There's Nothing Wrong with Her gets a big thumbs up from me. It really is a compelling read, and lots of it lands very close to home. It's available on pre-order now. The full UK hardback release is on the 1st of August and the US on the 6th of August. I'll link to Amazon in the description. And in the next interview of this series, I'll be talking to Anna Davidson about the wonderful Poetry for Life and other chronic conditions. So if you want to get ahead of the game and read this in advance of that, then I'll link to this on Amazon too. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Until next time.